Today, when we hear the word wealth, most of us immediately think of money. Bank accounts, investments, real estate, stock portfolios, and digital numbers visible on screens. Wealth is measured in currencies, interest rates, and net worth rankings. This concept appears objective, mathematical, and universal. Yet this modern understanding is surprisingly new. For most of human history, wealth had a completely different meaning, and it tells us a great deal about how societies defined prosperity and how power, survival, and identity were shaped over time. To understand the essence of wealth from a historical perspective, modern economic approaches must be set aside. In past eras, money was not the central figure. For people, gaining social prestige was far more important than accumulating wealth, surviving, or generating profit. The concept of wealth is not fixed. It is a mirror that reflects what societies valued most in different periods. In the earliest stages of human history, the idea of wealth was measured not by today's market or monetary systems, but by entirely different criteria. For hunter-gatherer communities, true wealth meant having access to food supplies, drinking water, and collective security. Groups that survived harsh winters, could fight hunger, and were capable of defending themselves were considered the most prosperous. Although the term capital did not yet exist, tools, hunting skills, and strong social bonds between individuals effectively fulfilled this function. Everything changed with the emergence of agriculture. From that point on, wealth was no longer just an abstract idea, but took on a tangible, visible form. Land became the fundamental source of prosperity. In truth, the matter was simple and sincere. Whoever owned fertile land controlled food, and food was the greatest power of that era, life itself. Along the banks of ancient rivers such as the Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, Indus, and Yellow River, people regarded grain, livestock, and life-giving irrigation systems as the greatest states and the most valuable treasures. The key indicator of life was surplus production, because when a society could produce more than it needed, that abundance made it possible to sustain rulers, priests, armies, and the builders who erected monumental structures. In these early state systems, wealth was not a free concept. It existed directly under the shadow of power. The collection, distribution, and protection of resources were controlled by kings and religious centers. Therefore, prosperity was not measured by personal wealth. Richness was measured by how close one was to centers of power. People's economic stability did not stem from the resources they accumulated, but from their ties to rulers. As societies became more complex, wealth gradually took on a symbolic form. In the classical civilizations of the Mediterranean and Asia, gold and silver were regarded as universal indicators of value. Coins were easier to store efficiently, transport, and tax. But even then, money alone did not determine prosperity. In ancient Greece and Rome, social status was defined not only by money, but also by factors such as prestige, land ownership, and citizenship. More than personal wealth, public generosity, and political influence were the main criteria that elevated an individual's position in society. In ancient societies, using wealth as a display of power was more important than accumulating it. In this era, where prosperity had a public and political character, accumulating wealth without contributing to society was not viewed positively at all. The medieval period is characterized by a radical transformation in attitudes toward wealth. Dominant religious views made the moral status of material prosperity ambiguous. Wealth was no longer accepted as a direct symbol of success or virtue. On the contrary, excessive accumulation of property was seen as greed and a moral danger. The place of wealth in society depended on how it was spent. Acceptable wealth, if riches were directed toward building churches, charitable works, or maintaining military order, this was perceived as supporting divine and social order. Condemned wealth. Personal luxury and extravagant lifestyles often became targets of criticism, as the religious ideals of the period promoted modesty, sacrifice, and obedience. Economically, under feudalism, the nature of wealth was different. In this system, the foundation of prosperity was not money, but control over land and labor. The power of feudal lords was measured not by their financial reserves, but by the territory and human resources they commanded. For peasants, the lower class of society, the concept of prosperity had a more practical meaning. For them, wealth simply meant stability, sufficient food, and a safe life free from violence. As a result, the Middle Ages formed the idea that wealth can be dangerous. Riches were no longer an end in themselves, but a means that had to be morally justified. If prosperity did not serve higher moral goals, it was considered sinful. In the late Middle Ages and early modern period, wealth was no longer simply about owning land. As trade routes expanded and cities grew, merchants became increasingly prominent. Imagine ships, new trade routes, and signed contracts turning into new sources of prosperity. What affected me most is that wealth ceased to be purely physical and began to rely on trust and promises between people. The first banking systems, credits, and paper records, bills of exchange, emerged during this time. Wealth became more flexible and mobile. It was now possible to transfer and grow it on paper from one place to another. However, this dazzling development also had a very dark and tragic side. As exploration and colonialism increased, wealth began to be measured by the extraction of gold, silver, spices, and raw materials. Empires demonstrated their power not through local production, but through control over the resources of the entire world. The Industrial Revolution fundamentally changed the concept of wealth, shifting it from land ownership to productivity, capital, and individual innovation. This transition turned wealth into a goal achievable through entrepreneurship rather than birth, increasing social mobility. In the modern world, wealth is measured more by abstract numbers, digital assets, and future potential, but this development has also created deep social inequalities. Today, prosperity is seen not only as an economic indicator, but also as a psychological and social status marker. Nevertheless, against the backdrop of global crises, the true meaning of wealth is being reshaped away from endless growth towards sustainability, security, and freedom. When we look at the historical process of evolution, it becomes clear that wealth is not merely money or material assets. It is an indicator reflecting the fears, hopes, and value systems of each era. The concept of wealth is not static. It has continuously changed according to societal needs. In times of scarcity, it meant physical survival. In hierarchical structures, social status. In religious environments, moral balance. And in the industrial era, productivity. The historical development of wealth is not a linear progression, but rather a mirror effect shaped by collective priorities and power balances. Understanding these past experiences allows us to question not how much we possess today, but what kinds of values we are truly pursuing. Finally, the real condition of any society is determined by what it prioritizes and what it neglects. Societies are rich in what they value most and poor in what they forget. Thank you for watching us. If this topic was interesting to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. In the upcoming videos on this channel, we will take a deeper look at history, economics, and the major processes shaping the world. Your opinions are important to us as well. Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, those who understand the past build the future more correctly.